I was sitting in a cafe in just near Broadcasting House, and I suddenly thought, I wonder how many calls I've taken on my show on Radio 2. And I did this calculation involving the number of days and years and all of that, and I worked out it was 24,908. So I had 92 to go before I hit 25,000. And I should really think about what I'd learned from all of those amazing calls from amazing listeners. So it's called What I Learned, and it's about those 25,000 calls.
You have quite a bizarre shorthand on your programme, don't you? Because you have a whole language that your production team uses. And one phrase is the witch's post. So explain the concept of the witch's post.
We always talk about the witch's post. And actually, once I say what it is, you'll start noticing them everywhere. It's essentially, imagine a professor standing by a stream, and he's talking to his students. And he says, have a look at these stones in the stream. At the top, you've got the purple stones, slightly speckled. They're about 1,000 years old. In the middle, you've got the dark stones, and they're made mainly from quartz and granite, and they're more like 500 years old. And by the way, there's a post in the middle of those stones, and they used to tie witches to the post, and when the river rose, the witch would drown. And then at the bottom, you've got the much lighter stones, which are yellow, and are just at the... And of course, by the time you get to the other stones at the bottom, nobody is listening anymore, because all you're thinking about is the post, and when they tied the witch to the post, the witch would drown. In fact, actually, that's all you'll think about. That's all you'll remember of what the professor said for the rest of your life, not just on that day, but ever. And we always get them on the radio. We're always getting the moment of compelling distraction. And we're trying to work out, is that just the joy of doing a radio show where you can't schedule everything because of necessity listener contributions are untidy? Or is it something we should try to control? I mean, in the end, we decided we just can't. We just can't.
So, for example, you asked one listener where he lived.
Yeah, I asked somebody where they lived, and he said, I'm on the corner of Loch Ness because I'm trying to see the Loch Ness Monster. Now, after that, I can't even remember what he was calling about.
So that is the joy of doing a programme like yours, isn't it? You can follow that thought and go with it, and that's what makes it entertaining and lively. Why shouldn't you just go with that thought and jettison whatever you were planning to do?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that the thrust of the book I've written is actually that if we've got a competition now between what we might call experts, let's say astronomers, and listeners who are giving us experience, we're shifting much more towards experience.
But
so
should we be?
Well, for years and years and years, we've listened to astronomers when we want to talk about space. We go to blokes, they're always blokes, with telescopes in rooms who've written lots of books, and they describe space. Now we want to hear from astronauts. We want to hear from people who've actually walked on the moon. Now, as it happens, the astronaut might not even know what planet he or she was walking on. But we want to hear the experience.
If I want to hear ignorant people just giving their view, I'll go to the local pub. I mean, you call the old model of journalism, such as you practiced for 20 years on the Today programme.
And still am.
As a foreign correspondent and a Westminster correspondent, the old clapped-out model.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm sorry, but sometimes I like to hear from somebody who knows what they're talking about.
I love the idea that a mother of 5 isn't better than a professor of parenting.
It depends what they're talking about.
I love the idea that an expert in Lyme disease doesn't know what it's like to have Lyme disease. Now, I had an example of this the other day, Bridget, where we were doing something on psychopathy. And we had a choice. Do we get in a professor of psychology from Cambridge? We had the name. It was all ready to go. Or do we speak to a psychopath? Now, you tell me which one you want to speak to understand that condition. And I think what's fascinating... Now, I'm not, by the way, saying it's a good thing. I'm noticing it. Because I worry, too, like you, I'm kind of trad. So I worry that we do need context. In the end, if you don't know what planet you're walking on, we might need to ask the astronomer something. But the power of the first-person story is dominating everything now. It's partly accessorized by technology, which wasn't there when we started. And it's partly that we are very much now focused on the individual in a way that we weren't before. So an expert in ladders is someone who's fallen off one. When we were in the run-up to the Brexit referendum, we were talking about a story where the Queen, according to The Sun, was in favour of Brexit, right? So an expert comes in and says, almost certainly not true. She might even be pro-Remain, but she's more likely to be impartial. Phyllis Capstick rings from Sheffield, and I said, what do you think of that? And she said, I don't care what the expert says. Experts built the Titanic. Now, I might not agree with that sentiment, because in many ways I quite like experts. I don't think I want to be on a bus driven by an immunologist, and I don't want an injection from a bus driver. But we've got to recognise this is what's happening now. And by the way, one more thing for your beloved experts, Bridget, is that for 50 years they told us that fat makes us fat. and that we should eat no more than 2 eggs a week. All wrong. It's now being revised. It's sugar and refined carbs. They turned every car in London into diesel. All wrong. Now being revised. The Bank of England said that they had what they called a Michael Fish moment with their Brexit predictions. All wrong. So, the best one of all probably is the paediatrician Sir Roy Meadow, who said that 3 cot deaths is murder and got innocent mothers jailed. So I think there are questions to be asked of experts. We've got too many of them, actually. We've got too many wretched ones. And people, I think, generally, this is not my view, but I can see that my listeners have slightly given up on them.
This book covers your showbiz career, if you like. It's the Eggheads, it's Strictly, and it's the radio show. One of the anecdotes you tell is about a health scare that you had.
Oh, yeah, well, it was after Strictly, actually, and I noticed, we always have to be on our guard for these things, that I had a sort of freckle that looked larger than normal on my chest. And I thought, well, I'll keep tabs on it. But it didn't go down, you know. And I then did what panicking blokes do, which is I got out a holiday snap, and I found myself in the sea in Devon, and I zoomed in, and it was definitely smaller in the holiday snap. So I thought, okay, this is trouble. So I talked to Dr. Sarah Jarvis, who's our doctor, who's, by the way, is local around here. And I said, what do I have to watch out for? She said there's something called A, B, C, D, E, and it's to do with the coloration and the enlargement and all that. And I said, look, why don't we do this? Why don't we get an expert into the studio, get somebody who knows what they're doing.
You do need
Oh dear. We get somebody with a scalpel into the studio, we have a live biopsy, and then they can tell me on the air whether I've got something tumorous. And about 2 weeks later, I had to say to her, look, I'm really sorry, this is embarrassing. But what happened was when I was on Strictly, they put fake tan on us. And for some reason, the fake tan pooled on a freckle. And it faded from everywhere else, but it was there for an extra 3 weeks. So it's a false alarm. But I've noticed recently there's a thing in the news about cyberchondria and just generally speaking how we need to avoid diagnosing by Google. And I wrote in my book about a particular incident that happened to me, which actually involved a local doctor as well. It's so embarrassing. I'm just trying to think, can I actually say this? Because I haven't really told this story with my own voice yet. But essentially, it was this. I had a pain in a private area. Okay, we're not talking about W4, and I Googled the symptoms, right? And I basically came up with a name, and it was something like peritoneal septicemia with ulcerated something. But anyway, it involved a 3-hour operation, and that fitted the symptoms completely. They were relieved at night. These symptoms actually, strangely, but in the day the pain was pressing. And you know, if you look up pain in your testicles on Google, you will find all kinds of explanations, none of which are good. Sometimes it says you must not ignore it or death will result. That was one thing I saw. So I emailed my doctor, a lovely woman called Dr. Deirdre Gallagher. I said, look, I'm trying to cut out the middle person here. I know what I've got. It's this. I gave her the 5 or 6 words, a long description. One of them was Latin, actually. I need a 3-hour op, and do you want to just book me in to save you time? She said, and she emailed back, this really, I'm really impressed, Jeremy. But we're sort of, it's not really the way we do it, so I'd like to come in and see you to come in and see me if you can. And then so I booked an appointment, of course, in about 2 weeks' time. And then a week later, I had to email her and I said, this is embarrassing, but I discovered it was a number of pairs of pants I was given for Christmas that were too tight. And I was wearing only those pants. And obviously that's why it was easier at night when I wasn't wearing them. So we have to cancel. And since then, I've been very much against Googling illnesses.
Of course, we've learnt this summer that you are the best paid journalist in the BBC. Are you worth it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the definition's a bit odd because I think Radio 2 is a hybrid show between topical chat and entertainment and music and everything else. So I'm not in the news department. But as to the question, am I overpaid, which one of my listeners brilliantly rang up and asked me, and that was probably the greatest call in the history of my show, because I'm the only presenter who had to actually face a listener on that question. I obviously can't answer that. I would say, yes, I'm overpaid compared to my mother, who was a doctor's receptionist, or my father, who was a college lecturer. Am I overpaid compared to the guy who does the breakfast show on Radio 2, who I discovered gets 3 times as much as me? I guess not. But obviously the big story of the list is the gender pay gap, and that does very much concern me, because I've got 2 daughters.
And it's interesting, because of course your wife is a BBC journalist. And so I would love to have been a fly on the wall in your kitchen that night when that discussion was going on. And now the BBC, Tony Hall has said that he's going to get an audit done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which may well result in you being asked to take a pay cut. So I'm going to ask you the Jane Garvey question. Would you be prepared to take a pay cut so that she and others can be paid more?
I think that all the presenters will probably be asked to take pay cuts, actually. I think that's probably what's going to happen. So I don't, that seems to me a logical outcome of what's going to happen. So we'll see.
Will you fight it, or will you say, oh,
I don't know. I haven't got to that point. I mean, funny enough, the thing I'm most interested in is in it being on the air for a long time. So when people say to me, what do you want to do next year? I just say Radio 2, and they say after that, and I say Radio 2. So the contractuals with the BBC are secondary to that.